I think most people in the West have been blindfolded by these headlines that Putin enjoys over 80% support of Russians, which I think there is much more to it than meets the eye. So probably the personal support for the president is there, but there is so much more, and many Russians are not happy with the system, with domestic economic policies. I think we're going to have a test of that in September parliamentary elections, which me and my colleagues view as an important step to returning Russia to democracy.
And yet, sir, there was a coalition of alternative parties, of like-minded parties, which has lasted literally a year, 13 months, and appears to have broken up for various reasons. But do you think that puts the opposition to Mr. Putin at a disadvantage, the fact that you guys couldn't work together?
Look, we have many difficulties at different times, but the breakup of the current coalition also creates some positive sides, because there is the other Democratic Party, Yabloko, which was always their competitor. I think now with the breakup of a coalition under Parnas party, led by former Prime Minister Kasyanov, Yabloko has a chance to pass through 5% threshold. So I think you could more or less safely bet that liberals would be struggling for getting back into parliament after 13 years of absence.
You referenced the popularity ratings of the president as well. What opportunities do you have, or put it another way, do you have enough opportunities to challenge that popularity democratically in Russia at the moment via the media or via political debate? Democrats
alone, no. But I think there's a fairly good chance that Putin's ruling party will lose the majority in parliament for the first time in 13 years. Rubber stamp parliament was a very important part of Putin's vertical of power in Russia, which have ruled unanimously and made unanimous decisions. I think we can change that together with other different forces, and Democrats will play a role in this. So there will be some probably difficult, tedious transition, but there will be.
The point about timing for the election, because much has been made by some commentators about bringing forward the timing to September. What sort of scene does that set, and is there going to be lower voter turnout because it is right after summer?
That is the key part of Kremlin's strategy to maintain control over elections, to lower the turnout. This is what they did in the string of regional elections in the previous years, because it's closer to summer. They want to move on further at the beginning of the academic year in schools and universities, so they want people to stay home, stay on their dutches and not go to vote. Definitely turnout will be slightly lower, but the good news is the Russians are disciplined to go and vote for federal elections. For this event they will probably come back from vacation, so turnout will be high enough to have a real reality check on Putin's popularity and his party's popularity.
Vladimir, just one to wrap up with. Do you feel safe in Moscow these days? And I ask that question because obviously the prominent murder of Boris Nemtsov, an opposition leader, got a great deal of attention worldwide. And every time I'm in Moscow and I cross that bridge, you still see flowers and tributes to Boris Nemtsov. How do you deal with your own safety, and is it something that you're concerned about?
Look, we don't feel safe, but we prefer not to talk about our personal safety as much as about the importance of the things that we are doing. It is the Kremlin's ultimate goal. It was the goal of Nemtsov's murder, to scare us off, make us run away, emigrate somewhere here. We're not doing that. We're staying in Russia no matter what the risks are.
In at least the noises the government's making about a privatization program. And we see Alexei Kudrin appearing to return as the presidential economic advisor. Now, from a Western perspective, we've always imagined that he's more liberal, that he believes in market economics, and that there's always been this body within the government that wants to take a more liberal economic approach and pursue the privatization program, but they've been somewhat suppressed by, should we say, more conservative elements who have returned the country to a statist approach. Is this real, or is this a sop? Is it something that's being thrown out here to encourage the West to believe that change is imminent?
Look, just half a year ago, there was a very serious talk that Kudrin might take a serious executive post in the presidential administration, in the government, in the central bank, whatever. At the end of the day, what he got is but a secondary advisory job in some expert council, which doesn't really influence things much. So I think that's a serious downgrade of expectations for Kudrin's positioning. And privatization, quite important. What they want to do right now and what they are discussing in the government is but to sell a couple of shares on the boards of directors for a few $1 billion. No real structural change, no demonopolization is expected. So you got to have like 10% shares of a big state company still owned by the state but sold to the market. I don't think this is going to change much.
Given the the comments you make about the Duma, I think are well taken, but President Putin seems to have arranged the presidential election process in such a way that he will be in power as president for some time to come, regardless of the makeup of the Duma. Do you think that's the correct assessment of where Russia is headed? And is there any likelihood that he will be removed through a democratic process? Would it ultimately need to be an uprising of sorts to remove the president?
Look, realistically, you got to expect Putin to stay in power and maintain control for quite some time ahead. But importantly, we're moving in a very unpredictable trajectory. I think September parliamentary elections will be a reality check. Do Russians really support this system and monopoly of the ruling party, which existed over many years? Or they want some change, some kind of transformation, maybe even under Putin's rule. So I think we got to move on through this changing events, which would transform the system, and despite the fact that Putin will probably stay in power.